So thank you everyone for joining us today, for joining this Meetup Live event. My name is Janine and I oversee Meetup Live as well as most of our events. I'm so excited for this event as someone who is in her mid-40s and is back in the dating scene and has experienced a recent breakup. I can't wait to hear everything that you have to share. Our special guest, Emmi Fortin, who is a breakup coach and the organizer of the Breakup and Relationship Support and Connection Meetup Group. Emmi is here to help us heal from heartbreak. So I kind of need this. Thank you. Perfect timing. During this event, you will learn 3 ways to shape your mindset after a breakup that would help you assess your situation, move forward, and find the right support to keep your head held high. Before we dive into the questions, I just wanted to go over the event guidelines. So this event is going to be recorded, and you probably have noticed by now that you will not appear on the video. It is only Emmi and myself. You've probably also noted that we cannot hear you. You can only hear Emmi and myself. Everyone is muted. That is a courtesy by Zoom. Also, we encourage you to ask questions. The chat is going to be turned off for the duration of the event, but we would love to hear from you. So please submit your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we will try and get through as many questions as possible in the Q&A portion of the event after the conversation with Emmi and myself. And closed captioning is also available. If you'd like to turn it on, just hover over the live transcription icon at the bottom of the screen, and you can select your preferences. So we are doing opening remarks, which I just did, and I'm going to briefly introduce Emmi to everyone, and then we're going to dive right into the fireside chat. And I can't wait for the conversation and all the questions that we're going to ask Emmi and that she's going to give us our great answers to, and then followed by Q&A. So again, we encourage you all to submit your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we will try to get through as many of them as possible. Emmi, welcome. And did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Fortin, yeah.
Fortin. Okay, I got it right. Okay, so Emmi, I'm so excited to be talking to you today. Emmi is a breakup coach and author of Who Is Your Red Dress? One Woman's Quest to Break Up with a Love Addiction. Emmi helps women and men rebuild themselves after a breakup or a damaging relationship so they can feel confident, stress-free, and enjoy life as they move forward. Emmi's clients express feeling a renewed sense of self, direction, and independence during and after their work with her. Emmi, welcome.
Thank you. I am so excited about this, mostly because this is my favorite topic to talk about. So
it is not my favorite topic, but
yeah.
You know, it's very necessary, right? And needed. So, okay. Emmi, first question for you. Why did you write your book, Who Is Your Red Dress? And what did you hope that your readers would learn from it?
That's a great question, because when I very first started writing, it was not with the intention of publishing a book or being an author. I actually started writing these little stories, these little vignettes to express how I was feeling and what I was going through. And then years later, I actually thought, I can put this together to be a whole book. So when I did get into the mindset of I want to publish this as a full story book, my main goal was, if people read this, I want them to feel seen, understood, heard in what they're going through, just by being able to read my experience, to know that they're not alone in how they're feeling and what they're going through, and to kind of be able to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, think about how's my story going to end, essentially.
Thank you. So in terms of timeline, were you a dating coach prior? Did you start your meetup group before you wrote the book? When did that all happen? Because you are a very busy woman.
Yeah, so all of the breakup and relationship coaching, writing the book, this only really came in the past few years. I was a high school biology teacher for 16 years. And it was during that time that I was in my situationship. It was a 6-year stint of breakups and getting back together, on, off. And so during that time was when I started writing. And then it was only the past 3 years that I've been doing the coaching and published my book last year.
Congratulations on the book. And tell us a little bit about your meetup group.
Yeah. So I started the Meetup group a year and a half ago. And that as well was with the intention of bringing people together to offer support and connection in what they were going through. So I knew how I felt when I was going through just like gut-wrenching heartbreak over and over, anxiety, stress, loneliness, depression, everything. And it feels like you're very alone when you're going through it, even though logically you know that a lot of other people are probably going through the same thing. So when I wanted to start the Meetup group, it was really valuable for us to come together and start sharing experiences so that people could just listen, support, offer feedback. And it's really a growth-minded group. So we're not like an X-bashing platform. We're all there to kind of offer support and solutions on how to move forward.
Thank you. I am going to join your group. We've talked about this before.
We would love to have you.
So you said the big word situationship. And before we get into like, breakups and how to handle breakups, let's unpack situationships, because I feel like that's a completely new term that is being floated around and is everywhere now. So, okay, what is a situationship? How can you identify if you're in a relationship or a situationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. Situationships are typically very kind of unexplained, like they're uncertain. Maybe the expectations for what is going to happen in the relationship are not set. You might experience feelings of confusion all the time. For example, maybe you'll be talking to the person for pretty frequently and consistently for a few days or weeks, and then all of a sudden they'll ghost you for a few days without any kind of, explanation of where they went or what's happening. In my case, that happened. Also in my case, I couldn't introduce the person as my partner. So when we would be alone together, it would feel very much like we were in a relationship. But then if we would be out in public, I would be introduced as a friend, or maybe not even introduced at all. So again, a lot of uncertainty around how things are going, and just unclear expectations.
So what's the difference between a relationship and a situationship?
Well, in a relationship, you have both agreed to enter into a relationship together as a team. You have both agreed to be there and work through things together and as individuals. In a situationship, it's not defined.
So how do we fall into situationships, right? Like, how do you go from like meeting someone to wanting a relationship with this person, but you end up being in a situationship? Like, how does that happen?
Mm-hmm. So I was kind of thinking about that, and I was like, ooh, I have kind of a good example that it is a metaphor, but let's think for just a second about if we were to invest in buying a house. For most of us, I would say that's probably a pretty big investment, right? We would give that a lot of thought. We would pay attention to our finances, where we want to live, all that stuff. So let's say that you find this house and you see it and you just love it. And you're like, oh my God, it has everything I want. You're walking through the house and you're like, oh, I can see us having babies here. Oh my gosh, this house has everything. I can see, my workspace. I can see how I'm going to decorate it. And you start creating this vision of what you think living in this house will look like. And then when you go to the signing, you're reading through the contract and the lawyer points out a few things to you. The first thing the lawyer says is, oh, I just want to call your attention to the fact that you're going to totally own this house, but we're not actually sure how long you'll be able to live in it. The second thing is that there could also be other people living in the house from time to time, and we don't need to disclose that to you. And lastly, this house is built on a sinkhole, so it could last your whole life, or it could disappear into the center of the earth. Like, you're cool with all that, right? And as you're listening to these things, you're just like, this is making me really uncomfortable. I don't think I want to opt into this. But then they say, you do have to decide today. There's a long line of people who are interested in this house. So what do you think? You're gonna
And it
sign?
is somewhat your dream home, right? It's just not
Yes.
going to be yours, but it is your dream home.
But if we were to think about like, what decision would you make in that choice of an investment of that size, right? Even though you have all these red flags like coming up in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, but this is everything that I wanted or envisioned for it to be. And so you might opt in, even though you're really feeling like this might not be the thing. And so I encourage everyone to think about the size of the investment you're making when you know, engage in any kind of relationship with someone else, and just making sure that it's truly in alignment with what you want.
So listening to the metaphor and what you just said, we can sign, we can sign for this house. We're not buying this house. However, is there ever a moment or a time when it would be worth it to buy this house, this situationship?
Yeah, I know for some people, these red flags don't show up right away. And I've had many people tell me like things were great for the first 3 months. And then all of a sudden, like all these different signs started showing up. And so then people get confused about, should I stay? Should I go? And so my response to that is to just constantly be monitoring how you feel consistently in the dynamic, and always coming back to what your core values are and what your core desires are for a relationship. And it's something that you really need to be assessing on a regular basis. And what you want and need at one point could be different at another point. You kind of have to go with your own evolution as well.
Thank you. I've definitely been in situationships in the past, although they weren't labeled situationships then. And something that I keep on hearing a lot lately, and I would agree with this, being that I've been in both relationships, situationships, and even a marriage. Situations, breakups from situationships are more difficult than a breakup from a real relationship. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what makes it so difficult and what makes it so hard to break up from a situationship as opposed to breaking up from a relationship?
Yeah, it might be counterintuitive to think that being with someone for 3 months and then breaking up can actually be harder in some cases for some people than being, you know, married for 20 years. And of course, that experience is unique to everyone. So I definitely don't want to minimize the heartbreak with the ending of any relationship. However, there is a different dynamic with a situationship. And because of the uncertainty, it's very similar to how one might get kind of hooked, just like a gambler might feel. And there is a very famous behaviorist and psychologist named B.F. Skinner who termed this phrase intermittent reinforcement. And so when we are getting a reward of some sort or reinforcement, but we don't know when we're going to get it, it keeps us coming back. And so in my case, in my experience in mine, I was actually presented pretty upfront about the fact that, you know, my ex-partner like didn't want an actual relationship. So just like the house metaphor, I like signed the contract knowing in advance. But the thing that kept me going back was that every time we spent time together, it felt like we were in that really like traditional relationship that I longed for. And so one thing to pay attention to is when you are uncertain, let's say like you're texting and then you're ghosted and then they come back, you're like, ooh, it's like this rush when you get the attention, when you get the message come back in. And just like a gambler never knows when they're going to win, you know, they'll take a lot of losses, but then they get that win. A lot of times they won't walk away with the money. They'll stay and they'll hope to win even more. And that's very similar to what happens in this kind of dynamic as well. And so the reason why it's so hard to get over is because you get hooked in that kind of hopefulness about your winning.
This is bringing back memories. Okay. So we talked about breaking up from a situationship. Now let's talk about breaking up in a relationship, right? So after a breakup occurs, what are some of the tendencies that people fall into after the breakup that do more damage than good?
Yeah. So I know from personal experience and definitely from things I've heard people tell me, one thing that I turned to was escapism. So I was a salsa dancer. My ex was a salsa dancer, but it's something that allowed me to just like escape my reality. And I kind of became like addicted to that too. So, anything that takes you out of your reality, like using substances, distractions, like overworking yourself, those can all be things that people will do to avoid the overwhelming reality. That doesn't really help you progress forward. It might take your mind off it for a little bit, but we really want to be focused on how can we really support ourselves moving forward.
So it's not, sorry, everybody always says one of the things that I hear repeatedly when you're going through a breakup is you need to be distracted, which is exactly the opposite of what you just said.
So I would, instead of using the word distracted, I would love to hear I'm creating an intentional social network for myself. I'm creating experiences that are intentional, meaning we're thinking about how we really want to feel and then crafting an experience with particular people to support that. So rather than just going to like random outings here and there with random people, we want to focus on a vision of how do we want to feel and what will give that to us? What will that look like?
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
You were moving on to.
Another thing that is very common is listening to friends' advice. And where our friends love us and they mean well and they are trying to support you, a lot of times, and people can, chime in here whether they feel this way or not, but you can feel really lost after a breakup. You can feel really lonely. And what's happened is you've at some point disconnected from yourself. And so much of your energy has gone toward that relationship and that other person that you're trying to find yourself again. We hear that phrase a lot. And so when all of your friends and your family are all chiming in about what you should or shouldn't do, that can actually be more confusing. Whereas if someone takes the time and the energy to really reconnect with themselves rather than outsourcing for what they should do next, it can be a much more healthy internal navigational system.
Okay. So something else that I hear a lot is a way to get over a breakup is obviously under, which I'm not going to repeat. I'm not going to continue the phrase, but that's something that I hear all the time. Is there any truth to that? Like, should you find somebody else immediately to help you get over, and I see that a lot. Like, I know that the tendency that people tend to fall into when it comes to breaking up with someone or after they break up.
Yeah, I think what I would like to bring light to around that is that no matter what you're doing in your life, whether it's going through something sad or going through something exciting or happy, we as humans are always chasing a feeling that we want to have. And so when you're coming off of a breakup, typically you have all these really miserable feelings and you want to feel happy and good and like you're living again, right? And so going right into a relationship or dating or passionate relationship with someone else right away is supplying what you are wanting to feel in that moment. I would kind of issue a caveat though, that if you haven't taken the time to really process what you've been through and then get really clear about where you're going, it's highly likely that you'll be bringing some baggage with you from all of your previous relationships. And you want to make sure that the people or person you're choosing is in alignment with the path you want to be on. Because what I see and what I have done is that people can just fall into relationships with people because they really might feel passionate or good, or they have chemistry in that moment, but they haven't created that really clear vision yet of the whole picture.
We'll come back to when should you start dating after a breakup. Okay, so what are the 3 ways to shape your mindset to help you gain clarity during this time so that it is a good time for you to reflect, right? And do some introspection so that moving forward, you can ultimately find what it is that you're looking for. the type of relationship that it is that you're looking for?
Yeah. So I like to think of myself as like when I work with people as like this ambassador of clarity, confidence, and peace. Now, if you have these three things, it's highly likely that you'll be making choices that are healthy for you and that are going to serve where you want to go, where you want to be. So I created something that I call my RED process, RED, and it helps you to gain perspective on these three areas. So the R is restore. So you said, what are the three areas? We need to reconnect, restore the connection with yourself, your intuition, your values, the things that I've mentioned. And that's going to bring you clarity. The E is elevate. So here is where we gain confidence. Elevate means you're going to focus your energy on you and how you can learn from this person, from this experience about yourself. What are your blind spots? What are your patterns? What do you want to elevate yourself in? Like, are there skills or talents that you want to learn? Are there goals you want to attain? That's going to give you confidence. And then the third piece is the D, dare. This is stepping outside of your comfort zone to be a little bit uncomfortable up front in exchange for something that's actually going to bring you peace in the long run.
Thank you. Can I just ask that you give us, like, this all sounds great, right? Restore, elevate, and dare. I can do it right now because I'm not in the middle of a breakup, right? But going through a breakup, that seems like a lot, right? How do you restore yourself or elevate yourself or dares? Can you give us examples of ways that you could do that while you're going through a breakup?
Absolutely. And I'll use myself as an example, just as easiest for me. So when I was going through that whole situationship thing, in ways that I would reconnect with myself was I started doing different practices of self-care. So I started doing yoga consistently. I started meditating. Now, let me tell you, I did not like these things when I started. I mean, I could barely sit still for a minute. Like meditating just like made my skin want to crawl. But I started exploring all these different self-care practices. I started to do a lot of reading and research and listening to experts around the things that I needed to learn. So I started taking care of my body because that was something I could control. I could control what I was eating, how I was working out, how much I was sleeping. So those are restore examples. Elevate means, what I did was I challenged myself really greatly. And I specifically needed to find my own independence and competence. So, one of the chapters in my book is flying solo in Spain. I took a solo trip to Spain for 3 weeks to learn Spanish. So that's elevate because I had a goal for myself. I also wanted to explore new cultures. And so I pushed myself to challenge and grow and learn. And then the dare piece was that I started making choices that were different from the choices I was making before, even though they didn't feel comfortable at all. But I knew they were pushing me in a direction that I wanted to go. So I started making new friends. I made the decision that I was going to attract really strong, confident women into my life because I wanted more female friends. So I set very specific goals in each of those areas. I reached out to mentors, and really created the best overall support network I could for myself.
I love that. I mean, basically, like we were saying before, it all comes down to you taking care of yourself, you listening to yourself, you learning about yourself and reconnecting with yourself. And I think like something that, we went through the breakup, we're dealing with the breakup, we're healing through the breakup. What happens when you get to that place where you feel like you're finally starting to move on? Like, will you maintain a positive mindset? Like, what can you do so that you can, moving forward, like you can stay feeling positive and, remain with all these new habits that you've picked up throughout this process?
So I would say consistency with all of these practices is super important because you might notice that you might make a lot of progress if you're like spending all this time working on yourself. And then when you put yourself back into the dating scene, or you entertain the idea of, starting to see a new person, you might find that all these things that you thought you had taken care of are coming up again.
Hmm.
And so the important thing to remember is that just because you're starting to see someone new, you should not stop all of your practices. That is actually the most important time to continue with them. And, it's very easy when you meet someone, maybe you're caught up in the butterflies and you're like, oh my God, everything's great now. And then you stop all of your stuff. No, continue. That's going to be like your foundation. That's going to bring you through the next stage of your life.
I love that you brought this up. It's and something that we're kind of taught, right? Where it's like society teaches us that once you find your person, that everything will disappear and they will just make you feel, happy and complete and all these other things. And it's like you no longer need to work on yourself because everything is just going to be, hunky-dory and it's going to be great, which isn't the case. And I just like you said, I've been doing a lot of work on myself and started dating someone new and realized that, oh my gosh, there's like this other bucket or like layer of things that I need to deal with that I'd never dealt with, that I didn't realize I had to until I started dating this new person. Which was just a shocker to me. And it was just like, oh my gosh, wait, you mean I have more to work on? Which was insane because I thought I'd been working on myself all this time, but different things surfaced when I started dating someone new. And I'm grateful that that person gave me the space to work on those things, although he and I did break up a month and a half ago. What is the most important thing that you need to remember while you're going through this breakup? Because yes, you're going to have days. I mean, like I said, I broke up with this person a month and a half ago. I've had great days where I'm like, oh, I'm doing just fine. I don't need this person. And then I have days where obviously like I think about them, which is a lot. I think about them a lot, even though I've moved on. I still think about them. But what is it that, is most important for you to keep in mind so that you don't go backwards and like ruminate or get stuck on that person?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that we can have a tendency to be really hard on ourselves as far as like how long it's taking us to get over something, or upset with ourselves if we do have those thoughts or feelings that just come back out of nowhere. And we can have this sense that we're going backwards, right? We're regressing. And the fact of the matter is that as long as you keep your vision kind of always present and top of mind, you're not regressing. You're constantly taking baby steps forward. And the most important thing to remember is that you are grieving. You're grieving the loss of a person, of a life or relationship that you hoped that you would have or that you expected to have. You are potentially grieving a lot of things all at the same time. So that process looks different for everyone. So if you're frustrated about that, just give yourself some grace with that and know that it's actually okay to be grieving and having these reoccurring things and still making progress and feeling happy some days at the same time. So keeping in mind that as long as you're doing your own work to constantly be growing and learning and getting curious about, I wonder how this can work for me, rather than kind of dwelling in the why is this happening to me, then you'll always be kind of searching and open to solutions and different ways of thinking and being.
One of the things, and I shared this with you, like there's a saying that I heard and it just like stuck with me, is that it's not a breakup is not a rejection, it's just redirection. And I really, really love that. I shared this with you because, when you think about a breakup, especially for me, anything that seems definite is so overwhelming, and not saying that there is a possibility that I will get back together with this person or not, but it just seems like, oh my gosh, like you're saying, you're grieving, right? So just, it's so overwhelming how something is just ending on so many levels, right? Someone that you connected with, someone that you saw a future with, or that, you envisioned a life with, and all these other things, right? And it's just like all of that, all of a sudden just coming to an end for me seems very overwhelming. So the idea that it's redirection doesn't make it so overwhelming and so definite. It's just like there's a tweak, there's a shift happening, right? And that for me helps me keep going. And I don't know, maybe I'm being delusional on that, but it definitely works for me. And it's helped me tremendously, because it helps me keep hope that even with that, where it's like, okay, it doesn't mean that I'm never going to find someone. This just didn't work out, but there's still that hope that I will find someone that is going to be right for me, and that, I can make it work with.
Well, this is another thing that keeps, I would say the major thing actually that keeps people stuck is fears and insecurities about the uncertainty of it, right? Because what I hear most often from people is, what if I never find someone that I love like that again, or someone that loves me like that again? I hear, I don't want to die alone. I hear, all of these kind of catastrophic thinking that happens during the overwhelm. And when you can just acknowledge when you're having these thoughts and feelings that you're in the catastrophic mindset, like you're automatically going to worst case scenario. Can you entertain and get curious about other options? You haven't even considered other options. And there's a lot of them.
So, Emmi, okay, how can you roll it back, right? Or how do you pause so that you don't snowball when you feel like you're starting to get to that point to like the overwhelm, right? Like, is there a way that you can stop it or roll it back so that it just doesn't become this like catastrophic thing where life is over, you're never going to find anyone again?
Yeah. So I just read this quote that super resonated with me from Lao Tzu. And it said, if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you are anxious, you're living in the future. If you feel peaceful, you're living in the present. And so if you find yourself spiraling into all of those things, it means that you are not in the present. You are worrying about something that either hasn't happened yet, like never meeting someone again or dying alone, or you are forcing yourself to relive sad, miserable emotions. So anything you can do to bring yourself back into your physical body in the present moment is going to help you tremendously with that.
And what are some ways to do that?
So practices like deep breathing, practices like going out for a nature walk, practices like yoga, meditation, dancing, put on that favorite song that you have. I know when I was a teacher, I was a hot mess at some points, and I had to be ready for a classroom full of kids to be in front of my face. And yet I was on the verge of tears constantly, and my whole body was shaking all the time because I was so anxious. So what would I do? I had 3 minutes in between classes to go to the bathroom. So what did I do? I would take my phone, I would go to the private bathroom, lock it, and I'll put on my favorite song, which at the time and always still makes me feel happy, is Danza Kuduro. And I would dance in the bathroom for my 3 minutes, and then I would go back to my class.
I love that. So I have a very similar practice when I am like very anxious or overwhelmed, but you're not going to believe who it is that I listen to. Harry Styles. I put on, like, Harry knows how to diffuse me like no one else. I put on Harry Styles and I start dancing around and singing to his songs. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, life is great. I feel so good. I have like this burst of energy and I'm so excited and so happy. It's amazing the power that music has over you.
Yes. And it's something that's bringing you back to the present moment, because you're using anything where you're using your 5 senses, you're hearing the sound. If it's loud enough, the beat might actually even be vibrating through your body. You're moving your body. You're breathing heavier because your heart rate's getting up. So anything you can do with the 5 senses will bring you back to the present moment and back into your body, which is called grounding.
Thank you. Okay. So I want to move on to what happens when you, so two questions that I'm like, I can't wait to ask you. One is, when should you start dating after a breakup? And this is a completely different question. Should you get back with that ex that you broke up with?
All right. So I hear this
I
question.
know this is like the good part, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid question. When are you ready to start dating again? Or is there a certain amount of time you should wait? And my answer is, I would say there is no definitive set amount of time. Everyone's healing and progress process is so different. I think the most important gauge to be able to tell whether you're ready or not is, have you done the three elements that I've been talking about today? Have you had the time? Have you taken the energy and the time to reconnect with yourself? And do you feel confident and secure in who you are? So I have a lot of people tell me, and I know I certainly felt like when I was in it, and even when I was like doing my work, I still had very low self-worth. And yet I hopped on the dating apps hard. I mean, I was like a serial dater. Why? Because I was in this like mad frenzy to find my person. And even though I went on hundreds of dates, it was completely pointless because I was not in the right space to receive a partner that was actually good for me. There were actually a lot of people that I went on dates with that could have been potentially good partners, but I was like, no, they're too boring, or they're too nice, or, whatever the excuse was. I had not released the stuff with my ex yet, and therefore I was not available, even though I desperately wanted to be available. So for anyone considering jumping back into the pool, I would do a really hard check-in with yourself and be brutally honest and say, where do I stand with how I feel about myself? If you are lacking self-confidence right now, it might not be the best time for you to start dating again, because your choices are going to be informed by how you feel about yourself. Now, I don't think that you need to do like all the work and then meet a partner. I think sometimes if it's a healthy, supportive relationship, that it can actually help your growth process as well. But you need to be very aware and very intentional about what you're starting.
I love this. Thank you. There's like so much information out there on when you should start dating. And I know that for me, this was after my divorce. And then I dated someone. I would always take like 2 years off in between meeting new people, because I always thought, okay, I have to do work on myself. But then it was so hard to go back out there and put myself out there again. What would happen is I would like go on 1 or 2 dates. They wouldn't work out. And it's like, exactly, this is why I'm not dating. Okay, I'm going back to being alone. So I think it's also important, right? Like just that it's the right amount of time for you, where it's like, don't wait too long, but don't start too soon after the breakup.
I also think it's not as much about time. It's more about, have you created a support system for yourself that involves your own practices and your own richness of life, friends, family, everything. So for example, I did the same thing. So I was divorced before as well. That relationship I had perceived to like lack passion or whatever. So what did I do? I went right from that relationship into a relationship that had a ton of passion. And that's what got me addicted and stuck in a toxic cycle. So just taking that energy and space to like really come back to you, it might look different time frame wise for everyone, but I know that the next relationship after that last one, I set it up for myself completely differently. I have never let go of making sure that I have a very well-rounded, supportive life so that I'm supported no matter what in the future.
We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, so let's talk about, I know that I asked, there was like two parts to the question that I asked. Should you get back with your ex that you broke up with? And why do people do that?
So I think if you're thinking about getting back with your ex, this first of all involves you doing your stuff first, but then you need to really be objective about how your partner is showing up. So is that person open to growth and learning? Is that person open to making the connection between you a priority? Is that person open to learning relationship strategies and communication tools with you? Because it needs to be a team game. If you're trying to go in and get back with your ex and just like make it work or hope that it works, you need to have a collaborative effort. You need to feel certain about that.
Okay. So should you get back with your ex?
If you
Is there like a
If
checklist
you've been
that
trying
you
to change someone for years and you're
have?
still not seeing the changes that, like you're saying you can't accept this person for how they are or the way things are. No, don't get back with your ex. If the person might tell you things, but from your stepping back and observing their actions and their behavior, are they doing what they're saying they're going to do, or are they not? Like, you can determine whether this is going to be a team effort or not.
Thank you. I made the mistake of getting back together with my ex-husband, but then got divorced. Okay, so you shared before that breakups can be isolating, which we know because we've been there, and how important it is for you to have the support. So I want to now talk about what it is like. You've talked about how to support yourself, right, through all of this and have this very rich life. I want to talk about how friends and family can support you while you're going through this, and what your friends and family should and should not say, especially since you touched on be good to them for advice. And more often than not, the advice that they give us is not really what we need at the moment. So let's unpack that a little bit of like, what can they say that will be helpful?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to know about you and your connection to your family and friends is like, it's great that you have people that love you and support you. Should you listen to their advice? That's in question. If you have a family that is extremely opinionated, or maybe you have like very strong cultural beliefs, it's important for you to think about, okay, is this actually in alignment with what I believe and want, or is it just because I've been around this my whole life, or I've been brought up a certain way? So definitely assessing that. And then a lot of our family and friends, like I said, they think they're doing a good thing. They want to be supportive, but they're probably going to throw advice at you that could have worked for them in the past, but might not be the right choice for you. So I would suggest finding groups like support groups or, growth groups, finding education that supports what you think you need to learn in the moment, finding mentors. I know I hired coaches when I was struggling, and it was immensely helpful to have a sounding board and also have someone providing like exercises that I could be implementing throughout my week. So that was very helpful. I think surrounding yourself with like-minded people is also really important, rather than almost like trauma bonding, like finding people who are going through the same crap that you are and then like always commiserating about it together. You might feel comfortable with that, but it might not help you move forward. You want to put yourself in situations of where you want to be.
I agree with that so much. And I can't emphasize enough, like, I feel like we have to give ourselves grace when we're going through this, but also like our friends and family need to give us grace as well when we're going through breakups. As I said, started dating someone new in January, broke up a month and a half ago. It was very difficult for me to go through this breakup, because it was the first person that I started dating after like 2 years.
Wow.
So it was a really long time, and I really like this person. And I cannot forget that one of my friends was so upset with me because I was so upset over this breakup, and he couldn't comprehend why I would be so upset about breaking up with someone that I'd known for such a short period of time.
Mhm.
But it was like, I can't control that. You deal with your breakups differently than I deal with mine. Like we deal with different aspects of our lives differently. I can't get over someone the same way that you do. You badgering me about not moving on quickly enough is actually making me feel worse about myself, because it's making, not only do I feel like I was rejected by this person, but now I feel like there's something even worse with me, because now I'm like devastated and can't get over a breakup.
Yes. And actually that point right there was something I forgot to say earlier, of like the biggest mistake people make is thinking that you should be feeling a certain way, or be at a certain point in how you feel. And so if you are a friend that's trying to support someone who is going through a breakup, the best thing that you can do, the most supportive thing you can do, is just be a person they can talk to, and then just mirror back what they're saying and validate it. Like, wow, you know what? That must have been really hard for you. Just coming off a breakup, you must feel pretty lonely and sad sometimes, right? And then be like, hey, I'm here for you if you ever want to talk. Then you can ask them if they want your feedback. But a lot of times people just like come in hard with the advice, and it's like, A, I didn't ask for your advice, and B, your advice might not be what I need right now.
Yeah. Or you should start dating right now, or you should wait. It's like, okay, wait, I'm sorry. I know what I need, and I'm going to do what I think I need. And if it doesn't work, that's your job as my friend to support me. Okay.
Another thing you can do as a friend, though, is just to ask questions. So rather than giving advice, ask the person questions that might help. It's kind of like a brainstorming session, rather than like you're coming in hard with advice, and you're helping that person come to their own solution as well. Just as a friend, get curious about what they're going through, what that must be like for them, and kind of approach it as like a brainstorm.
Thank you for all this great information, Emmy. We are going to share a slide with your book, and we're also going to share some links on how everyone can get in touch with you.
Awesome.
So here is a slide with Emmy's book, Who is Your Red Dress? We shared the links in the chat for Emmy's book and Emmy's website, where you can find a free mini guide on how to get over a breakup. We also shared all of Emmy's social media links if you'd like to stay in touch with Emmy and see what she has going on and what she's up to, as well as the link to Emmy's breakup group, meetup group, if anyone would like to join. And if you join, I will see you there, because I'm definitely joining. Emmy, is there anything that I left out that you'd like to add before we jump into the Q&A? Because there are so many questions.
Oh boy. Yeah, no, that's great. Just so that everybody knows, this isn't a self-help book like traditionally, it's a memoir. And so it kind of reads like a spicy novel. You can probably like a beach read type of a thing. And hopefully you'll resonate with some of the things in there. And yeah, I'm just always want to hear other people's stories and kind of brainstorm with you.
All right, ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Here they come.
Here they come. All right. Sarah asked, it's been a year and a half since my boyfriend and I broke up. I'm not sad anymore, but I am angry at the reason we broke up. How can I continue to remind myself to be grateful for those 2 years, accept that he was a reason and a season in my life, and accept that he was a reason and a season in my life? Oh, I feel for you, girl.
Yeah. And this is a very commonly reoccurring theme, is that of acceptance, and just really having a hard time rehashing, like what happened, what didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. And so to that, I would first say, when you get these thoughts, try to just acknowledge them as thoughts. Doesn't mean anything about you, right? You don't need to judge yourself for it. It's just like, oh, I'm having that thought again. And then see if you can find a way to be able to just let it pass on by. Maybe you do some movement, maybe you journal. But the important thing is to not judge yourself and to not just kind of like suppress it. You can even kind of like talk to the thought, like, oh, you're here again. I see, and just kind of be playful and know that it doesn't have to mean anything more than you're having a thought. And then redirect towards where you want to be and what you're creating for yourself. Your vision is the most important thing.
Thank you. Okay. Tracy, this is a great question. Tracy asked, are the people who are hooking you in the situationship also being hooked by the same intermittent, did I say it right?
Intermittent.
Yeah, reinforcement. Is that what's in it for them?
I think it could be. I mean, we tend to think about relationships sometimes as like, oh, the other person is doing this, this, and this. But remember that a relationship is a dynamic between two people. So I think it definitely could be intermittent reinforcement for both people. And you may not have to necessarily think of the other person as like a villain. It could have to do with both of your attachment styles. I know for me, I was more of an anxious attachment, meaning like exhibiting kind of codependent qualities, whereas my ex-partner was more of an avoidant. So, he would like come in and then disappear, and then come in and disappear. So it's a dynamic. And so I think that's a great point that this person has brought up. It is a possibility.
Thank you. Okay, Carolina asked, how do I get past the feeling that I should have done something different to prevent the breakup? I have gone through that so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So again, that is a thought living in the past. I know logically that you can't go back and change anything, but one of the things that I can suggest that you try is just every time you have these thoughts, bring yourself back to the reality of what is happening right now. So, right now, we are not together. Doesn't matter how that happened, but this is the reality of right now. Right now, I am focusing on XYZ. Right now, bring yourself back to the present as much as you can.
This is a great question from Anonymous. What are some options other than dating sites to meet a new person, especially if you feel like you have unfinished business, like having kids? What is that like, dating with kids? Or like, I guess like they're asking like what happens, or how do you meet people? How do you date? How do you meet people if you broke up with your ex and you have kids in the mix? Is it different? I can only imagine it must be more complicated.
I don't have kids myself. I would imagine it is much more complicated. And I've definitely heard from people in the breakup group that it can be. First step is making sure that you are taking care of yourself in a way that you can be a good co-parent, because you'll have to deal with that other person on a regular basis, and it might affect how you feel and how you show up in other relationships. As far as dating with kids, I think being really clear on your boundaries around, like when you introduce that other person, what kinds of things you'll do together. But there are really a lot of people who are in a similar situation. You're not the only one. There are a lot of people out there who are dating with kids, and there are a lot of people who are actually, looking to find someone that has kids to have that sense of family. So it's definitely not, like a bad thing necessarily.
Okay, I found a great question, and now I don't know okay. Harry, I don't know if this is I guess it's a question. Harry said, I am setting up boundaries and working on myself. Why do I feel like I'm being selfish? I feel like so many of us feel that at times.
So if you are showing up to work, showing up for your friends, showing up for your family as a sad person, as an unengaged person, as someone who is carrying around a lot of anger or resentment, do you think that is helping you build connection with any of those people or fostering a sense of like deep purpose? Doing work on yourself is not selfish, as long as you're also trying to share your skills and abilities to love other people in your life that you care about.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. One is from Jess. Why do we tend to think of all the good of the relationship? And how can I remember the bad to get over this?
Well, I wrote a book about it to remind myself. But a lot of people write stuff down, like if you keep a journal, you can write your thoughts there and you can occasionally go back to them to remind yourself, oh yeah, this is why this relationship or person is not working for me. You can, I know that you tend to go back to only like the good memories. So I guess it's kind of important to write down or create some kind of symbol or art to remind yourself of the not so good things.
I did. So what I did was for this previous one, I made a list of how this person wasn't meeting my needs, right? Or like my values. And every time that I felt sad or upset about it, or like, oh my gosh, it was my fault, I could have done more, they were so great, I would read this list and it would just remind me of why this person was not for me and this was the right thing to do. And it wasn't, and I think the thing about it was that it didn't discount all the great memories that he and I had. Like we did have some really great times, and I have so many fond memories of he and I together. But when I look at the big picture and wanting to build a life with someone, the things that he was missing are way greater, than those moments that we had together.
I totally agree. You don't have to, you will have good memories. That's why you were with the person to begin with, I hope.
And I think it's important to remember that because you do want to carry those things in your next partner. Like this person made you feel alive. You were able to laugh your butt off with this person. You probably want to look for that in the next person that you're with. Like laughing is important to you.
For sure. And trying to also fill your life with things that make you feel the way you want to feel. That way you're not necessarily seeking that in another person. You're already doing that work to like fill your own cup. And then the other person can be a nice addition to that.
Okay, Emmi, we have time for one more question. And I'm addressing this question because it has to do with the comment that I made about not rejection, but it's redirection. Okay, so Melody said, it's all very well to say that a breakup equals redirection, not rejection, but after 52 years of marriage, that is a hard perspective to embrace. I completely understand. Listen, after 4 months of being in a relationship with someone, it's a really hard perspective to embrace. So I can only imagine what it must be like for you. Also, the dating world is just like outer space compared to all those years ago. I'm in my 40s and it still feels like outer space for me to go on dating sites or the way dating works now, the new terms and the way that everything is. So her advice is, can you advise on how to approach that?
So just so I'm clear, so advise on how to approach like dating in the 50s
now,
or
yes. How to
like
advice on how to approach dating after a 52-year marriage ended.
Yeah. Or, oh, I remember she was saying that it's hard not to take it personally if someone leaves you after a long marriage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first piece there is sometimes it is a wake-up call. I literally call my program Wake Up From Your Breakup because that's what happened to me. It was an important, really challenging, hard thing in my life that I had to experience to wake up to a ton of other stuff about myself that actually made me change my entire career, how I see things in life, how I approach life, how I approach relationships. So sometimes it can be a wake-up call. It takes tremendous uncomfortable feelings to want to change something. Like if we're comfortable in our everyday life, we're probably not going to be motivated to change at all. So sometimes it could just be a wake-up call of like, what do you need to learn about yourself in this moment? The second half of how do you approach all of these foreign things like dating nowadays is again going back to the reality and accepting the reality. So I know a lot of people are upset about like, oh, like I don't want to have to do this. Like you're frustrated, but this is what is happening. And so how can you make your experience smoother and more enjoyable for yourself?
Thank you, Emmi. And that is it. We are out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm just going to say that if you'd like to watch a recap and recording of this event, you can on our blog. It'll be available probably by the end. It'll be available by next week on our blog. Also, Emmi, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone for joining us and for all the great questions.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.